I'm back. I am gonna start discussing The Catcher in the Rye. Today we're gonna talk about chapters 1 through 5. So, if you've read The Catcher in the Rye or these particular chapters, you've been introduced to Holden Caulfield, who is a famous character known for his sarcasm, his cynicism towards phonies. But really, underneath that facade, he's actually a deeply grieving, sensitive young man. The book starts as a flashback. He's actually in an institution in California, and then he flashes back to basically a few days in December, right before winter break, when he is about to be kicked out of Pensy Prep, um, like boarding school. And so it's hard to catch sometimes in the very beginning of the novel that he is 17 years old. He is in California near his brother, his older brother DB, who is a Hollywood screenwriter, and he talks about it as a crummy place that his brother visits him every week. And so he's hoping to come back home soon, of course, but obviously he's been institutionalized for some sort of thing that has happened that began way sooner than he alludes to. It has to do with his brother Allie, which he doesn't dump on us until chapter 5. Um, but anyway, the flashback begins on page 4. And it's Saturday evening, it's the night of the football game, and he's up at the top of the hill while the rest of the game and the rest of the school is going on. And it's because of what happened earlier that day. As the manager of the fencing team, Holden, was in charge of getting the kids where they needed to go on the subway in New York City, and he got flustered and confused reading the map on the subway. This is typical of Holden. He's unable to focus. He seems to have ADHD. And when they got off the subway, he left the foils on the subway. So they couldn't compete in their match and they had to come back early. Uh, the way Holden narrates, he kind of covers it up. He euphemizes these troubling moments. And so he hyperbolizes other things that are less important. So, for example, this is the version of the book I'm using. On page 5 at the top, when he's reflecting on the football game that's going on, he says it was the last game of the year and you were supposed to commit suicide or something if old Pensy didn't win. And so he blows up and exaggerates these smaller things. But then when he finds out, or when he reveals that he left the foils and equipment on the subway, he says, the whole team ostracized me on the way back on the train. It was pretty funny in a way. And it wasn't funny. You know that it was terrible. What Holden had done was pretty bad, and I'm sure his team was furious with him. So it's how he tells us stuff, I think, and what he tells us and what he leaves out, that it's important to follow him. And so anyway, he knows he's on the brink of being kicked out of school. He's failing all his classes. The only class he's passing is English, and it's not because Holden is not a bright guy. He's actually quite intelligent and he's very well read. He contradicts himself many, many times throughout these first chapters, but also throughout the whole book. For example, he says, I'm quite illiterate, but I read a lot. I'm a pretty healthy guy, but I smoke a ton of cigarettes, stuff like that. Um, but he knows that he's about to leave, and so he wants to say goodbye to a teacher who actually showed him some concern. So he leaves his post at the top of Thompson Hill, and he heads over to Mr. and Mrs. Spencer's home in chapter 2. And they're old, they're 70, and Mr. Spencer was his history teacher. And Holden, he's very keen on small details. He notices Mr. Spencer's Navajo blanket that he picked up in Yellowstone, and Mrs. Spencer, who's partially uh, deaf, like gives him some hot chocolate. It's these little details that he holds on to. But at the bottom line is, Holden has a classification for most adults, and it's that they're, well, and some of his peers too. It's whether or not they're phony, whether or not they're authentic. And so he finds Mr. Spencer not phony. Mr. Spencer shows a true concern for Holden, but because of the age gap, Spencer's not able to really hold Holden's attention, and or make much of a difference. But the fact that he tries means something to Holden. So they sit down together in Mr. Spencer's bedroom. He's sick. And he's got the grip, which is like the flu, and that's kind of gross. Holden might have a slight germaphobe situation. And he talks about how he had a conversation with the headmaster of the school. And the conversation centralizes around life is a game, boy. Life is a game that you play in order according to the rules. And Spencer says, yeah, that's right. You're the headmaster's right. Life is a game. And Holden tells him to his face at the bottom of page 12, yes, sir, I know it. I know it is. And then his narration tells us, game my ass. Some game. If you get on the side where all the hotshots are, then it's a game all right, I'll admit that. But when you're on the other side where there are no hotshots, what's game about it? Nothing. No game. Holden does that a lot. He'll ask a question and then he'll respond. And that's a form of hypophora if you're looking at this rhetorically. Uh, but really, to Holden, life isn't a game because his brother, we find out later, he died. It wasn't a game. And Holden seems to have, throughout this book, survivor's guilt. Why did he survive, but his perfect brother didn't? He died of leukemia. He seems to have rich guilt. He's at this private school. It's very fancy. He's surrounded by other rich kids. He's very privileged, and yet Holden is grieving and he's unable to succeed. His parents have no clue what's going on, and they just keep shipping him off to different schools trying to solve the problem of Holden. And now he's been shipped off to an institution of some kind. Of course, this part is the flashback where he's 16. He says, this is about the fourth school I've gone to. No one will really take care of Holden, and Holden is frozen in time at age 13, which is the age that he was when his brother died. Um, and so anyway, he's just super struggling, and life isn't a game to him. He seems to have like compassion for other people who are on the wrong side of the game. He earlier talks about Selma Thurmer, who is the headmaster's daughter, and she's kind of ugly. And so he feels pity for her. He knows he thinks that she knows what a phony slob her dad is, and he later reflects on Elkton Hills, which is another school that he probably got kicked out on. But he recalls that headmaster wouldn't talk to funny looking parents. And he said, God, I hated that goddamn Elkton Hills. So Holden just can't get over that how you're supposed to play the game. He finds social interactions completely fake, and that drives him crazy. Um, so his mind wanders, and on page 18, while he's still talking to Mr. Spencer, he thinks about what will become a huge symbol in the book. He thinks about Central Park South and the pond, and he wonders what's going to happen when to the ducks when it freezes over. Where did the ducks go, I wondered. Where do they go when the lagoon gets all icy and frozen over? I wondered if some guy came in a truck and took them away to the zoo or something, or if they just flew away. Holden is symbolically these ducks. Is someone going to come by and save him? Is someone going to take care of him now that his world has metaphorically frozen over? He's just desperate for that. And so his mind continues to wander to this, natural phenomenon, and he'll begin to ask people about it. But this is just the introduction to it on page 18 in chapter 2. So he leaves Mr. Spencer's unsatisfied. Mr. Spencer yells, good luck, and Holden's like, I hate that. And he goes back to his dorm and thinks back on who the dorm is named after and what a phony bastard that guy was. And then another important symbol of the book is his red hunting hat. And so he goes in, and there's a time when Holden is seeking companionship and a time when Holden is seeking solitude. And the hat seems to correspond with those times. So he goes back to his dorm room, he puts his hat on, and that seems to be like a safety cap to protect him from the phoniness of the outside world. And so he only got it for $1. He bought it as retail therapy as soon as he lost the foils. He just bought it in New York. And so that was a comforting moment. He puts it on, and he's going to read this book, Out of Africa. And all of a sudden he's interrupted by his suite mate, Robert Ackley. Now, he complains about Ackley and what a phony slob this guy is, right? He's got pimples all over his face. He leaves his fingernails around. He moves your personal objects. He's super annoying. But again, Holden has that heart for the underdog. And so because this guy is so gross and so annoying and so isolated and he's 18 years old and he has no friends, it's a Saturday night. Um, Holden actually spends time with him and invites him out to go get a burger with this other guy, Mal, who really doesn't want Ackley to be there. So Holden he's a good guy deep down, right? Um, when they talk about the hat, he and Ackley on page 30, he says, "Where'd you get that hat?" Holden says, "New York." "How much?" "A buck." "You got robbed." He says, "That's a deer shooting hat." And Holden says, "Like hell it is. This is a people shooting hat. I shoot people in this hat." And you're like, whoa, that's kind of chilling, right? Holden is no murderer, okay? However, this book has had a violent response to it. The man who assassinated John Lennon was carrying this book when he did it, and he called John Lennon a phony. That was in 1980. And apparently, the man who attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan also used this book as his inspiration. So Holden can't be taken literally when he says stuff like this. What he really means, I think, is this his judgment of people, his cynicism of people. But he's all talk. As I've shown, his actions are so much louder, and how he cares about people, so much more, right? Uh, so his actual roommate, comes in, Stradlater. And so this guy is a senior. He's been paired up with Holden as a roommate, and he's a good-looking guy. He's yearbook handsome, right? But he's a secret slob because his razor is gross, and it's just funny how Holden pays attention to these small details about people. But here's the deal: Stradlater has a date with the girl of Holden's heart, Jane Gallagher. Stradlater hasn't even taken the time to know her real name. He calls her Jean. Stradlater's not after her face. Stradlater's a ladies' man, excuse me, and so it freaks Holden out because Holden is like mentally still 13. There are a few things about coming of age he's not comfortable with. One is sex, another is religion, and those two themes keep popping back up throughout the novel. And towards the end of chapter 3, when he's sending Stradlater off on this date, which, by the way, Holden's going to write his um, English paper for him, but don't put all the commas in the right places. So even Stradlater knows Holden's getting kicked out, but it's not because he's not smart. Stradlater's using him to do his homework for him. But he's also going to borrow Holden's jacket, right? And he's got this big muscular build. He's a handsome guy. And so Stradlater on page, let's see, this is chapter 4, when he's revealing that he's going out with Jane Gallagher, Holden just starts, monologue out loud. And he's like, wow, she's a dancer, ballet. We used to play checkers together. She kept all her kings on the back row. Stradlater couldn't care less. Um, he talks about Jane's troubled childhood, how her parents are divorced and the stepdad is a booze hound. So again, the underdog and the sympathy for that, and Holden's own dysfunctional family. And so Holden, he's scared. He says at the bottom of 42, I ought to go down and talk to her and say hi. Stradlater's not threatened by this, and he's like, why the hell don't you? Quit saying it. Go ahead and do it. But Holden won't do it. I think Holden's ashamed. He's been kicked out of school. His life is nowhere where it should be. He doesn't want to be his worst self and see the girl that he used to be so close to. And so he just tells Stradlater, give her my regards. Don't tell her I just lost my light. Don't tell her I got kicked out, okay? And of course, Stradlater won't. But Holden's super nervous about this date. At the end of chapter 4, he says, I was really nervous because Stradlater's a sexy bastard. He's afraid that Stradlater and Jane are going to do stuff romantically, physically. Holden can't picture that. He can't hold that in his mind. And so here comes Ackley. And he says, I was actually really glad to see him. That took my mind off the other stuff. So he, in chapter 5, and Ackley, they go on out to dinner. It's like a dinner after dinner because on Saturday nights, their school serves steak, but it's not a good steak. It's this like you know, horrible, whatever, lumpy mashed potatoes, and you can't hardly cut these dry, hard steaks. But that way, when your parents come on Sunday, you say, "Oh, I had steak last night." Even his school is phony. um, and Holden also has trouble with authority. And a couple of instances, one, he wants to bring a snowball on the bus when he's going out with Ackley and Mal, and the bus driver won't let him, and it just really upsets Holden. He's like, I'm not going to throw the snowball. But he's like, nobody ever listens to you, right? No one ever believes you. He goes to these extremes. And so, long story short, when they get back, Holden puts his hat back on and he decides to get started on Stradlater's essay. He's going to write, it had to be about something descriptive. And so he's going to write about his brother's baseball mitt, Allie. And it's only until now that he reveals to the reader his brother is dead. And this baseball mitt, which it's a left-handed baseball mitt, which means it goes on the right hand because Allie was left-handed and would throw with the left hand. But Allie wasn't much of an athlete. He wrote poems in green ink on this baseball mitt so that when he's in, the back, he can read these poems. Um, Everyone in Holden's family is literary. Holden is a good writer, a great reader. That's the only class he's not failing. DB is a screenwriter in California. Here we've got Allie, the late poet of his family. And then we're going to find out he has a sister who's younger, and she's also really great. Holden loves his siblings, and he feels like the family screw up. And so that survivor's guilt really comes through. Um, and so he just drops this bomb on us in the middle of page 49 in a paragraph. He talks about how just great his brother is, and then he says he got leukemia and died July 18th, 1946. You would have liked him. He was 2 years younger than I was, but about 50 times as intelligent. He was terrifically intelligent. His teachers were always writing letters to my mother telling us what a pleasure he was to have a boy like Allie in class. He was the most intelligent. He was also the nicest. He talks about his red hair, red hunting cap. The two are definitely related. And Holden being kicked out of school all the time, like he can't even hold a candle to the way he puts his brother on a pedestal. So you can see why Holden just wonders, why is he still alive? Um, so that night that Allie died, he punched all the windows in the garage and his hand still hurts. He broke and he was put in the hospital then too. He couldn't even go to his brother's funeral. Um, so around 10:30, he finishes writing the essay, and he decided he wasn't tired, so he looks out the window. Notice all the times Holden looks out the window, and then he hears Ackley snoring in the next room, and he says he had to feel sorry for that crazy son of a bitch, and that's how he ends chapter 5. Um, so it's a wonderful introduction to this very unique character. You're never going to meet a character like Holden again, um, and and there's just so many things about him symbolically, his digressions, his use of repetition, his sarcasm. He's crazy funny, but just deeply grieving. So stay tuned, and the next time I come back, we'll talk about chapters 6 through 10. Thank you so much.